Shabbat Shalom. There have been so many thoughts going through my mind this week, as there have been for months, recognizing that we are a divided country with many different ways of looking at the world in which we live. And I know that that extends to this room, that there is no uniform response for what it means to be an American, what it means to be a Jew, and how both of those identities impact on how we understand leadership and policy. So on one hand, I thought I could speak today about something in the Parsha that is a timeless idea, maybe how the Jews went from being a family in Genesis to a people in Exodus. Or I could talk about the love and concern that Miriam showed for her baby brother Moses. Basically, something meaningful, completely innocuous, and ignoring that yesterday we inaugurated the 45th President of the United States, as we have been doing peacefully since 1801. But you and I know that if Judaism can't speak to the issues of the day, as well as the timeless issues in our lives, then Judaism and Jewish life will remain an extracurricular activity, not something that is integrated into the being of who we are. And I certainly didn't become a rabbi to remain on the sidelines of how we see the world. Now, who we are, of course, impacts how we see and understand our Jewish texts and their connection to our world. None of us come to Torah without our thoughts and our experiences and our lived lives to be the prism through which we understand our sacred and our holy text. So today, as I share my thoughts on Shmot, I do so with humility. I am one person, not just a rabbi, not just the rabbi, not just your rabbi. I have my own thoughts and opinions on the world, and yet because I am a rabbi, because I am all of your rabbi, I believe it is my sacred duty to weave the words of our Torah in a way that all of us can hear it. But I still share what I believe flows from Torah into the world, not our world into Torah. As I look at this week's Parsha and witness the rise of a new leader, as well as the significant acts of protest against that leader in the book of Exodus, I can't help but feel that, like so often, the Torah was written to be read exactly at the right moment, for this Parsha asks us to confront leadership and our reactions to it. Let me state from the outset, I do not believe President Trump is Pharaoh. It is important that you hear me say that before the rest of the Parsha, before the rest of the sermon. I am not saying that President Trump is Pharaoh. However, to not explore issues of what happens when a new leader arises or the concerns of a constituency would be a disservice to our Torah. So what does our Torah say? At the beginning of our Parsha, we read, "A new king arose over Egypt who did not know Joseph. And he said to his people, 'Look, the Israelite people are much too numerous for us. Let us deal shrewdly with them so that they may not increase. Otherwise, in the event of war, they may join our enemies in fighting against us and rise from the ground.'" We have all read this phrase many times, and we immediately know what happens next. There will be a rebellion by Moses, the Israelites will escape, and they will be on our way, and every April we will celebrate. But this morning, I want to explore three questions. How do we understand Pharaoh, and what does this say about us? What is the role of protests in Judaism, especially in connection to the Parsha? And finally, how do we respond to the world? There are two perspectives on how to look at Pharaoh. One, by Professor William Propp of the Anchor Bible, teaches that Pharaoh was a young, insecure, xenophobic demagogue who created the historically preposterous myth of an Israelite demographic threat for his own selfish political gains. But then there are those who saw Pharaoh as the opposite, a responsible national hero for his people. The Israelites, who buried their dead in Canaan and whose hearts were toward Canaan, were a serious threat of a fifth column in the larger Egyptian-Canaanite conflict. Thus, Pharaoh enslaves the Israelites to rebuild the wall around Egypt, the parts of which that had been destroyed during the war. So which is the simple, factual reading of the text? The answer, of course, is that it depends on who you are and how you choose to look at it and where you are getting your information. We know that all of us are reading and trusting very different news sources that interpret President Trump and the world in very different manners. One of the important challenges of anyone attempting to avoid further, deeper divides would be to read the news they generally do not trust with respect and curiosity. But this should never be at the expense of advocating passionately for each side's read of reality, but to do so in the knowledge that there may be many other interpretations. And so this brings me to the next question. How do we understand the texts of our day influences our perspective on the world and our ability to speak out? Clearly, we know that as a people, we have always found a way to do so. From the time of Pharaoh to today, Jews that have protested all leaders who protested for civil rights, leaders who protested against the Soviet Union who were enslaving our people who protested President Obama during the Iran deal negotiations, people who protested the United Nations last week following the abysmal Security Council vote. So this idea of protest comes no matter which side of the aisle you normally find yourself. So the question is, how do we know when to protest? As Rabbi Arthur Levinsky, a colleague of mine in Phoenix, shared, it is difficult to decide when, where, and under what circumstances one should defy the wishes or policies of leaders. The choice is simple when a leader calls for the murder of innocents, Hitler, Saddam Hussein, and so on. But it is much more difficult when there are leaders whose personalities or approaches we find objectionable. Are those with whom we disagree by definition evil? What are we to do so when a president acts in a way that we believe is imperiling our security? And what should we do if we find that nominees for key cabinet positions are objectionable to us? Isn't it the right of the president to form the cabinet that he will be able to lead? Do we write to our representatives? Do we ask them to exert pressure on our behalf? Or do we declare that those leaders are illegitimate and call for revolution? Something that we have witnessed not just during this election, but as we know, during President Obama as well. One thing that I know is that we don't engage in violent protests. Though the Torah would argue with that, the 10 plagues are just a few weeks away. And those 10 plagues were brought for the sake of justice, and we recall them at our Seder, though we drop bits of grape juice as we say each of them. So we must turn to later in our Parsha and further in our Torah to understand that there are many responses that we might see today that are in line with our tradition, that we don't need to sit back if we determine injustice. We know that Moses spoke up on behalf of the voiceless, a transformative movement, when he allied himself with the Hebrews, though he had grown up a prince of Egypt. We recall the Hebrew midwives who defied Pharaoh's decree of killing all baby boys and found ways to ensure that they, along with all the girls, lived as well, a reminder that each of us has a power to make a difference. Or we recall later on the daughters of Tzalafchad who, upset about the inheritance laws, petitioned to Moses, and because of their work and their values, the laws from God were changed. But we also saw that the Korach rebellion against Moses was done in a way that was perceived as too physical, too encroaching, and so it didn't result in a change. All it resulted in were the followers of Korach being swallowed up. So how does this apply to us? How do we understand these issues as they relate to our new president, but also, and just as important, a conversation about ideas in this country or elsewhere? First, as one of our members shared on Facebook yesterday, I watched Today. She wrote, "I'm not happy with the result, but I don't think it's time to turn our backs. Now is the time to watch even more closely than ever and to act and not react." Whether this is his intention or not, President Trump is causing people to finally pay attention to a system that many Americans have ignored, thinking that we can leave decisions to our elected officials and trust that they will support our views. If you want unity in this country, she writes, don't just go out there and protest, but do something about it. Learn the issues, study the views on both sides, and start by making change in your local communities. Connect with people. Don't cut friendships just because someone voted for the other side. That will continue to divide our nation. It also won't help just to sit here and complain and then gloat when something doesn't go right for the opposition. Get involved and be nice. Second, remember that it is in our Jewish tradition to pray with our feet. No matter what you believe, you can speak, you can use your voice, use your legs, use your power, just don't use violence. Like Moses and Aaron, approach your leaders, talk about what is bothering you, walk the walk. People have asked me, why am I going to the Women's March this afternoon? What is it going to change? The answer is simple. When I march this afternoon with my family, it is not in opposition to President Trump's election. It is an affirmation of my values. And if President Trump affirms those values, then we are simply in line with one another and we celebrate. If not, I will use my voice as my Jewish and American tradition compels me to. And finally, I will use prayer, deep prayer, to think about what it is that is important. And prayer can take place in a variety of forms. It can be linking our Jewish values and our American values, as in the prayer for our country that Carol recited earlier, and then understanding where that comes from in key moments by recalling key moments in our history. Just last Monday, on Martin Luther King Day, on the streets of historic Philadelphia, Dave and I showed our children the Liberty Bell, the Constitution Center, including key documents from the National Archives about presidential power, and Betsy Ross's home. I thought about what it means to be an American. I thought about the chain of tradition of our leaders. I thought about what each of them has brought to the White House, from George Washington to President Trump, knowing that I will never and have never agreed with each and every policy of every president, but thinking about what is it important to me. And so it clarified for me, when do I use my voice? But transformative prayer can also happen in public, and that is why I was so honored to give the invocation this week at City Hall to the New York City City Council. Here is a bit of what I shared. Eleanor Roosevelt once said, "Perhaps in God's wisdom, God is trying to show us that a leader may chart the way, may point out the road to lasting peace, but that many leaders and many peoples must do the building." Eleanor Roosevelt's statement regarding leadership is a crucial one during this time of year, having just celebrated Dr. King's birthday and inaugurated President Trump. At a time of a deeply divided nation, we recognize that we all must come together to find ways to commit and recommit ourselves to bring the world together, even through our disagreements. We might not agree on all policies, but I have to believe that we agree in the human dignity of each person, that each person was created b'Tselem Elohim, in the image of God, and that demands a sense of respect and love. And so we pray, Heavenly God, who desires us to do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly. We thank you for giving us the wisdom and the opportunity to be in the presence of one another, and we ask that you grant us more wisdom to truly understand that humanity is created in your image, since an injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And so we ask you, God, to open our hearts to stand with those who need our love and support. And in our tradition, we ask God, in the Aleinu to Litaken Olam, to perfect the world. And so today, we must understand that in a world torn apart because of differences, this sanctuary and this community must be the bastion of wisdom about which Eleanor Roosevelt was speaking. And so as we begin the book of Exodus, where we see a new leader, where we see the struggles of a people and their response, we acknowledge how each of us view the world might be different, but we respect one another enough to allow healthy conversations and peaceful and often necessary protests to ensue. When a new leader is appointed in the Torah, we say, Chazak ve'ametz, may you be strong and resolute. And so, in conclusion, I offer selections of a prayer of strength to President Trump, written by my colleague, Rabbi Matt Goertz. Dear President Trump, my tradition encourages me to pray for our appointed and elected government leaders. You are the President of the United States. You were elected by a system which has elected presidents since our inception as a nation. I do what my people have done for millennia. I pray for you, Mr. Trump, President Trump. I pray for the health of your body, Mr. President. I pray for your health so that you can endure the rigors of running the country. I pray that you sleep enough to be clear-minded, eat balanced enough so that you have the energy to make it through each day, and take care of your physical vessel so that you have the fortitude to navigate the weariness of being demanded in ways you have never experienced before in your life. So, Mr. President, I pray for your physical health. I pray for the well-being of your family as well, Mr. President. You have sacrificed a lot of your time as you have built your business, and you will now be pulled away in the most taxing ways. I pray that your youngest son is able to maintain the same level of privacy and respect children of the White House have received in the past years. I pray that your wife and adult children will love and support you in ways which help you serve our country. They too will sacrifice the next 4 years. I pray for the health of your mind, Mr. President. I pray that you are able to stay focused on that which counts the most. I pray that you are not diverted by the chaos that is politics. And finally, I pray for your spirit, Mr. President. Yes, I pray for your spirit. I pray for it to give birth to deep wisdom, discernment, and insight. I pray for your spirit to be touched by all kinds of people, especially those who have been made to feel afraid. I pray that your soul be touched by the sense of otherness. You are uniquely positioned to embrace the weak in a way which could change us for the better and forever. Your spirit can achieve all of that, Mr. President, so triple down on your spirit, and I will pray for it and you every day. You are the President of the United States. You are my president. You can change my life for the better. You can change our fractured country for the better. You can change our family's life for the better. You can change our world for the better. May our prayers be answered, and may God bless you and the United States of America. Shabbat Shalom.